My sister delivered the line with a cold, polished smile. "We don't want you to come to the wedding. It's not a place for losers." My mother's laughter followed, a sharp, approving sound. The calm that settled over me was absolute. "Then you won't need my card," I replied. They kept laughing, a private joke at my expense. So I left. Just walked out. But by the next morning, their credit cards stopped working. The decorators packed up and left the venue. Everything they thought was secure began to unravel. Of course, I was furious. Who wouldn't be? It's insane to spend months planning your sister's wedding, to pay for half of it, to wrestle with caterers and florists and a band whose name she couldn't even pronounce, only to be told you're not welcome. I was being edited out of the family picture, relegated to the role of a disgraceful extra. It began as it always did with us, beneath a veneer of normalcy. I was at my mother's house, finalizing the vendor list. I was the one organizing everything, despite it being Cheryl's wedding. She and her fiancé, Dylan, had skipped the last 2 planning meetings entirely. The deposits for the decorator and the caterer? They came from my savings. No thank you. No offer to repay. Just silent expectation. That day, I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, authorizing payment for the centerpieces. Cheryl breezed in, loud on the phone with one of her meticulously curated friends. Hanging up, she fixed me with that smug, satisfied look. "We don't want you at the wedding," she said, the words practiced and smooth. "It's not a place for losers." She laughed. Mom laughed too. For a second, I waited for the punchline, for the gotcha. That never came. She just stood there, smiling, pleased with herself. Then Mom added fuel, her tone dismissive. "Well, she's not entirely wrong, Kayla. You really don't fit in with their crowd, do you?" I looked from one to the other. No flicker of regret, no hint it was a cruel joke. That's when the final thread snapped inside me. Quietly, I closed my laptop. "I guess you won't need my card then." I stood, collected my bag, and walked out. No screaming, no tears, just a quiet, definitive exit. They had no idea that for 2 months, I had been the foundation holding their dream wedding together. The venue contract, every vendor, every backup plan, it was all in my name, secured with my money. And when I left, I took that foundation with me. That night, I began dismantling it all. An email to the decorator, halt all work. A note to the florist, final payment canceled. A call to the baker, cancel the order. I gave no explanations. I offered no apologies. By morning, my phone erupted. First Mom, then Cheryl, then a bewildered Dylan. They thought it was a mistake, a clerical error. By noon, reality hit. The decorator's cancellation notice arrived. The rental company recalled the chairs, linens, even the specialty lighting I'd sourced. Cheryl's voicemails escalated from rage to sheer panic. "What are you doing? This is sabotage. You're ruining everything." I didn't answer. For the first time, I wanted them to feel it, the helplessness, the invisibility, the sheer shock of not mattering. They'd operated for years on the assumption that their jobs meant nothing, that I was the eternally reliable sister who would always pay, always plan, always absorb their cruelty without complaint. That version of me was gone. They just didn't know it yet. When Cheryl called sobbing, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was full of excuses, stress, a bad joke, me taking things too personally. It contained everything except the only words that mattered. "I'm sorry." No apology. No thank you for all I'd done. Just a pathetic, "You're making everything difficult, Kayla." No, Cheryl. I'm making things fair. The consequences were swift. The decorator was the first to formally withdraw. Without my final payment, the contract voided. The floral designer scrapped the entire plan. The baker, with her $2,500 reality show-inspired cake, moved on to another client. Cheryl's calls grew more frantic, her voice trembling. Then begging. "I need your help. The wedding won't happen without you." Finally, she understood what I'd known. It truly wouldn't happen. They had no savings. Dylan had blown money on a pointless SUV. Cheryl's income was a house of cards built on social media ads. She was counting on our parents' wedding fund, but I'd known for months it was gone, spent on a new roof and plumbing. They'd kept it from her, assuming I'd silently fill the gap as always. Now, the decorator was gone. The baker was booked. The florist, who Cheryl had insulted, would only work with me. The rental company required my authorization. All Cheryl had left was an empty venue and a guest list, the ghost of a wedding without any substance. My mother's intervention was as subtle as a hammer. She came over without calling, letting herself in with a familiar knock-and-enter move. She didn't ask how I was. She just stood there and issued a command. "You need to stop this." I didn't argue. I just met her gaze. "Stop what, exactly?" "Cheryl is suffering," Mom said, her voice tight with accusation. It was all said in the heat of the moment. "Don't take it so personally. You think I'm punishing them?" "Yes." But I wasn't punishing. I was drawing a line. They had stated, clearly, that I was not wanted. They had laughed in my face while I managed the logistics of their joy. They reduced me to a nobody, an inconvenience, a small person in their grand story. All I did was accept their terms and remove my presence and my funding from their equation. That evening, Cheryl's texts took a new tone. "We need to talk. I want to fix this. Everything is wrong without you." It wasn't an apology. It was a distress signal from someone watching her dream ship take on water. I was no longer part of the crew. I was being hailed as the only available Coast Guard. I waited a day. Not out of hesitation, but from a faint, foolish hope that maybe, for once, Cheryl could exhibit a shred of genuine accountability. That she could say I was wrong. "I'm sorry. Thank you." That she might even glimpse that this wedding was built on my labor, not her vision. Instead, she posted an Instagram story. There she was with Dylan, clutching coffees, heads thrown back in laughter, geotagged at the wedding venue. The caption read, "If you're stressed, drink more champagne." Sparkles emoji. #bride vision. She was still playing the part. In the comments, someone asked about the vendors. Her reply was a masterpiece of deflection. "All the suppliers this season are so unreliable," crying face emoji. "Good thing we have backups." Backups? She had nothing. I was the backup. I had always been the backup. So I proceeded with the quiet unraveling. The hair and makeup artist, booked on my referral and paid from my account, refunded. The monogrammed bridesmaids' robes, ordered by me, returned. Even hers, still in its tissue paper. The champagne flutes, the guest book, the acrylic signage with their entwined initials, cancelled. The caterer for the cocktail hour cancelled. The string trio for the ceremony, my idea, entirely cancelled. The welcome bags for out-of-town guests, all me, now all gone. I was systematically deleting the digital set dressing of her perfect day. At first, she didn't notice, too absorbed in curating her glossy narrative. But by the third day, the facade began to pixelate. She texted again, proposing a face-to-face meeting. "This has gone too far. I get that you're upset. Let's be adults and move on." I didn't reply. Her words were empty, motivated solely by salvaging her own image and her disintegrating plans. This was about her reputation, not my pain. Then, late that night, the message that turned my simmering anger into a rolling boil. "If you don't want to come to the wedding, I understand. But maybe you could still pay for the cake? It was your idea, after all. It would be weird without it." The audacity was breathtaking. This was the same cake she'd mocked as trying too hard and not photogenic. Now, with her options vanished, it had been retrofitted into the cake of her dreams. I stared at the screen. There was nothing left to say. Her reality was now fully revealed. I was not a person, but a utility. A funding source to be tapped and ignored. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a wallet. I stopped replying. I blocked her number. I blocked Dylan after his vapid attempt at peacemaking. Maybe we should all just calm down and forget about this? It's not that serious. My mother's final voicemail was a crescendo of fury. "You're destroying the wedding. You're shaming this family. You're acting like a child. Cheryl tried to apologize, and you're just making everything worse." They still understood nothing. They believed in the old rules, where their words had no consequence and my role was eternal, silent salvage. But I was no longer following their script. With a week to go, guests began arriving, expecting a celebration. They had no idea they were flying into a phantom event. Cheryl was out of time, out of options, and out of her depth. What she did next defined her forever. It was the line, not just crossed, but obliterated. It was Thursday, 3 days before the wedding that wasn't. I'd taken a day for myself, a digital detox from the storm of their making. Phone off, I ran errands, lost myself in the simple act of buying groceries, and sipped coffee in anonymity. Around noon, a notification chimed from my home security system, motion at the front door. Probably a delivery, I thought. Then another alert, motion in the living room. Then the bedroom. A cold clarity washed over me. I opened the app and accessed the live feed. There she was, inside my house, moving with a quick, furtive purpose, wearing sunglasses indoors like a bad spy. She glanced around, then beelined for my closet. She knew right where to go. The camera watched as she slid out a small box from under a shelf and retrieved a plain, thick envelope. Inside, $15,000 in cash, money I'd pulled for a property transfer, not yet redeposited. A fact I'd only mentioned once, in passing, to my mother. She sat on my bed, opened the envelope, and counted the bills. Her lips moved silently. Then a smile of relief and triumph, spread across her face. She sealed the envelope, tucked it into her oversized tote, and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar. My hands trembled, not just from the violation of theft, but from the profound, intimate betrayal. This was my sister, in my sanctuary, taking what she felt entitled to, as if my life were merely an extension of her needs. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I wanted her to look me in the eye. I needed her to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had seen it all. I drove to my parents' house with a cold, surgical focus. I didn't call. I didn't knock. I just opened the door and walked in, a stranger in a familiar space. The scene was a casual tableau of normalcy they had no right to. Cheryl, Dylan, and my mother were in the living room, leaning over open takeout boxes, mid-laughter. The sound died the moment they saw me. Cheryl's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. I said nothing. I took my phone from my pocket, found the security footage, and pressed play. I held the screen up like a prosecutor presenting evidence. The silence in the room became dense, heavy. They watched the silent movie of Cheryl's crime, her furtive entrance, her knowing path to my closet, the careful retrieval of the envelope, the counting of my cash on my bed, the smile of victory, the casual exit. Dylan stood up, a stammered look escaping his lips before it withered. My mother's jaw went slack, then clamped shut. Her eyes darted from me to Cheryl and back, but no sound came out. She was a spectator to her own failure. I lowered the phone and looked only at my sister. I held out my open hand, palm up. My voice was flat. "Give it back." She froze. For a long moment, she just stared at my outstretched hand, then at the floor, then back at me. Without a word, she turned and walked upstairs. The sounds of rummaging, drawers, cabinets, drifted down. When she returned, the sealed envelope was in her hand. She offered it to me, her face a mask of sullen defiance. No apology. No explanation. Just the transaction. I took it, sliding it into my bag without checking the contents. I turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. I didn't look back when I spoke, letting the words hang in the ruined air behind me. "You are dead to me." Then I left. For 3 days, there was only silence. A thick, waiting silence. No frantic calls, no manufactured apologies. I imagined them huddled, seething with a shame they'd rather bury than address, spinning new tales for the outside world. Sunday, the wedding day, dawned and passed without event. There was no procession, no vows, no first dance. Guests who'd already arrived were funneled into a confusing, last-minute, intimate engagement brunch. The official line, postponed due to unexpected family circumstances. But whispers are louder than announcements. Vendors talked. Guests compared notes. A friend of Cheryl's slid into my DMs. "Is everything okay? Her story isn't adding up." I didn't reply. Let her sit in the mess she made. Let her explain the absence of everything she'd promised. The narrative was fracturing in real time, and Cheryl was learning a brutal lesson. She hadn't just lost a party, she was losing credibility, bit by bit. I braced for the Monday morning backlash, the rage, the blame, the desperate negotiations. It never came. Just more silence. Their strategy was clear: outlast me. Wait for me to miss the family drama so much that I'd come crawling back, ready to forgive and forget for the sake of peace. But the peace I had now, even angry and alone, was more real than any peace I'd known with them. I was done pretending. That week, the theft replayed in my mind. The chilling normalcy of it. I wasn't a sister. I was a line of credit. An emergency fund that didn't require permission or gratitude. And I wasn't the sole witness to her ruin. Texts trickled in from baffled guests. One, from an old college acquaintance, was particularly sharp. Sorry, Kayla. Had no idea all of this was on your dime, period. You dropped the ball? Dropped the ball. The phrase was a small, unexpected knife. I was the one who'd always carried the ball, along with everything else. Until I chose to set it all down. That's when I made my final list. Not of what was owed, but of what was mine. Tangible proof of my invisible labor. The $600 satin heels she'd desperately needed. The custom velvet ring box she'd flaunted online as Dylan's romantic gesture. The engagement photo shoot I'd booked and paid for. The silk bride's robe, tags still attached, she'd never paid me back for. I didn't want the things. I wanted the absence they would leave behind. My text was a simple statement: I'm coming for the ring box, the shoes, and everything else I paid for. Her reply, hours later, was dismissive. You're just being dramatic. It's over. Let it go already. She believed I was all talk. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. They were still there, Cheryl and Dylan, playing house in the aftermath. This time, I knocked, a firm, declarative sound. I wasn't sneaking. I was reclaiming. Dylan opened the door, eyes wide with surprise at my calm. I walked past him. Cheryl was lounged on the sofa in a robe, glued to her phone, performing nonchalance. I came for my things, I said, clear and cool. She let out a short, brittle laugh. You're making a fool of yourself. It's over. Nothing matters now. She looked drained, the effort of upholding the pretense finally showing, but a hard glint of entitled smugness remained in her eyes. I didn't engage. I walked straight to the guest room. The shoes were in the closet, forgotten in a dust bag. The ring box was on the dresser, posed as a centerpiece for her faded fantasy. I collected them, along with the robe she'd pilfered from the return package. As I moved toward the door, her voice came, sharp with wounded pride. Do you really think this makes you better than me? I stopped but didn't turn. The answer came easily, from a place of profound relief. No, I said. It makes me free. I didn't need to fight her war anymore. The world, it seemed, was happy to fight it for me. That night, a member of the canceled string trio posted a witty, vaguely shaded TikTok about brides who bite the hand that plans their wedding. The dam of vendor discretion broke. Screenshots, subtle tags, and sarcastic memes floated into the ecosystem of her social circle. Looks like this bride won't be walking down the aisle. I remained silent. My silence was louder than any post. Her comment sections filled with questions. Friends quietly distanced themselves. Her chosen maid of honor unfollowed her. Cheryl's perfectly curated world was experiencing a systemic collapse, and for the first time, there was no one beside her to blame. The humiliation was complete. She was alone. Then, 2 weeks after the non-wedding, the knock came at my door. It wasn't the frantic pounding I'd expected. It was hesitant. And when I looked through the peephole, I saw it wasn't just Cheryl. It was all of them. A somber, unexpected delegation, standing on my porch in the fading afternoon light. Saturday arrived, marking 2 weeks of quiet. The storm had passed, leaving a strange, calm clarity in its wake. Cheryl had vanished from my digital world. My parents had maintained a rigid, wounded silence since the day of the video. No news, no drama, no manufactured apologies. The peace was profound. For the first time in years, there was no performance required, no emotional ledger to balance, no walking on eggshells around someone else's ego. It was just space. Honest, uncluttered, and mine. So when the knock came at my door that afternoon, I assumed it was a delivery. I was not prepared for the sight on my porch. All three of them stood there, Cheryl, Mom, and, surprisingly, Dad. They resembled a failed delegation, utterly stripped of their usual armor. This was no intervention, it was a surrender. Cheryl was unrecognizable in a worn hoodie and leggings, her hair scraped back, face bare and pale with exhaustion. Mom looked fragile, shadows under her eyes. Dad's posture was resigned, his presence speaking of a reluctant, necessary agreement. I stood in the doorway, blocking the threshold, and said nothing for a long count. Cheryl's voice was a scratchy whisper. "Can we talk?" Every instinct said to shut the door. But a quieter, curious part one. I stepped back and let them file into the living room, the same room where I'd watched her theft, where I'd declared them dead to me. The air was thick with the ghost of those words. We sat. No one took the dominant chair. Cheryl perched on the very edge of the sofa, as if ready to be dismissed. And then, she began. There were no excuses, no buts, no deflection. She spoke slowly, picking over the wreckage. She said she had spent 2 weeks trying to paint me as the villain, the overreactor, but the narrative wouldn't hold. She couldn't escape the truth of who she'd been. She admitted to the entitlement, the cruelty, the staggering blindness. She didn't try to explain it away. She just laid it bare. Then she said the thing that dismantled my last wall of anger. "When I walked into your house that day, I already knew you had given up on me. I just didn't want to feel it. So I took something, because stealing felt easier than feeling you stop loving me." The raw, ugly truth of it hung in the air. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She was stating a fact. For the first time, I saw not my tormentor, but a shattered person, just Cheryl, without the filter, the facade, the smugness. Mom spoke next. Her voice was thin. "I spent a lifetime covering for her," she said, not looking at Cheryl. "It was easier than holding her accountable. And I got so used to you being the strong one, Kayla. I forgot you needed someone to be strong for you, too." It was the closest she would ever come to a true apology for a lifetime of imbalance. Dad cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said, simple and direct. No qualification. It was the first unconditional apology I'd ever received from him. Then silence. A deep, complete quiet where everything that had been said could just exist. They waited. The ball, for once, was irrevocably in my court. The anger was gone. In its place was a weary, clear-eyed calm. I didn't need to punish them anymore. They were already living in the consequences. "I forgive you," I said. The words surprised even me. Not for the wedding or the money or the theft. I forgive you for all the years before that. For making me feel like my place was something I had to earn and re-earn every single day. For never seeing me. Cheryl broke. The tears were silent, then heaving real, grief-stricken tears that seemed to rack her whole frame. Not for the lost wedding, but for the lost sister. I simply nodded, an anchor in her storm. After a while, the emotional weight in the room became physical. I shifted. "I haven't eaten all day," I said, the mundane statement a lifeline back to normalcy. Cheryl wiped her face with her hoodie sleeve, a faint, teary smile appearing. "Me neither." Mom looked up, tentative. "Maybe we could go somewhere?" No one moved for a moment. Then, without discussion, we stood and walked to my car. There were no plans for a fancy meal to paper over the cracks. We drove to the nearest McDonald's because it required no decision, no pretension, no effort. We ate in the car, parked in a corner of the lot, passing cardboard containers of fries, unwrapping paper from burgers. No one spoke. But this silence was entirely new. It wasn't hostile or tense or waiting. It was just quiet. There was no performance, no image to uphold, no hidden agenda. It was, perhaps, the first completely honest moment we had ever shared as a family. This didn't fix the past. The scars remained. But in that ordinary, greasy-fingered moment, something else was born. Not a perfect family, but a possible one. A fragile, tentative beginning, built not on my exhaustion, but on their accountability. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a quiet, real beginning. And for now, that was enough.